This is real. This is real. Welcome, everyone, to the Pursuit of Progress podcast.
That's the most excited I've ever seen you, Dane.
we are the world's two newest hosts. Um, my name is Dane.
And
I'm
I'm Trey.
joined by my buddy Trey. We're figuring this thing out. This will be our podcast. Trey, why are we doing this?
Oh man, why are we doing it? I would say, really, we both have a passion. Well, I'm not going to answer for you, but I will say, then for me, I've always had a passion for just how to better oneself, and I've been doing that personally for myself for obviously number of years now, and I think there's just some best practices on how to uh, best carry out your life in the world. Still learning, and so I guess that's one tip is that you never stop. You never stop growing, and so, but then along with that, I'm a big tech nerd, and so it's really the pursuit of progress. It's not just in life, but also like what's happening in the tech world, what's going on, and just economics and you name it. And we're here to just talk about that. So that's really, I don't know, in a nutshell. I'm probably going to clarify that more in future episodes so it's not so crummy. But yeah. How about you, Dane? You tell me.
That was great. No, I think you're doing a phenomenal job. Phenomenal job. Tremendous.
Absolutely the
Um,
best.
so Trey and I both share um, a, a passion for knowledge, for progress. We think the future is incredibly bright. Obviously, a lot of that comes from enthusiasm around technology and all the cool and interesting ways that is changing our lives for the better, and for the worst in some cases. It's not all sunshine and rainbows in the tech world. And clear example of that is the discussions around the progress of AI right now, and if that should be regulated and how it's going to displace our jobs and stuff. But I think what underlies a lot of our views is optimism and the desire to make the future good.
Mm.
So, uh, Trey and I both love just talking about tech and life, and we figured,
And
you
stonks
know,
as well. We can't forget the stonks.
and stonks too, and we figured we would just instead of having these discussions offline, uh, start a podcast, talk about progress and tech and innovation and life, in the hopes of building a community around that, um, and attracting like-minded individuals to also have them be a part of the discussion. So I hope that some of
That
these
was
conversations are insightful, that you learn from them, and at the very least, we hope that you're somewhat moderately, even just a little bit entertained by the two of us.
yes.
So, welcome.
That's awesome,
This
man.
is episode number one. So,
Yeah. We're going to stumble our way through it. Uh yeah, no, you said that way more eloquently than I could have. But yeah, anywho, it's do we want to just jump into AI and like maybe just even the philosophy side of it? Like, where do you stand today? Um, and then, yeah, we can just chat about that.
right. Well, so obviously ChatGPT is taking the world by storm, and there've been a number of offshoots of that. Now we've got Auto GPT, and Trey, I know you've been delving into this world a hell of a lot. I
Yeah.
think something that we've seen a lot over the last, what is really surprising about this new wave of innovation is the speed of iteration. Um, Apple launched the iPhone in 2007, and then it really took a number of years before all of the I mean, there were a lot of startups, right, at the time trying to take advantage of the shift to mobile, but then it took a number of years before the behemoths that we know today, your Facebooks, your Googles, your Amazons, before those really like took a stronghold in the market. I think what's surprising about now with AI is the pace of innovation and how all of these different tools and agents are building on top of one another. Um, so honestly, I haven't been able to keep up with the pace because it seems like there's something new coming out every day. uh, 1 minute something's the big buzz, and then the next day something else has kind of made that first thing obsolete. And I think we're seeing a lot more of that on a daily basis than we've ever really, or than I've really ever seen before. Um, so I'm excited about all of this and where it's going. I use ChatGPT pretty much every day. I think a lot of people that I talk to on a daily basis do the same. Trey, you've done a lot of diving in and testing of some of these different tools. What are some of the platforms that have kind of got you most interested or excited?
Yeah, so I guess one of the things, because you were kind of hitting on it, let me just go ahead and share this picture real quick, just to show like the scale of really how massive this is, or just how quickly. So again, what Dane, what you're talking about with this, the time, like just how much time it took for someone like Apple or Google to actually build up to be something that is today with AI and just where that's heading. It's such a on an exponential growth curve, and just that's what this main uh, uh, visual is showing is just how quickly the AI is actually learning things. And you can see like there was a slow growth in the 2000s, 2010s, and now we're getting to a point that as soon as we introduce a new subject to these learning models, it's instantly learning it almost. I mean, and this is stops at 2020. Now we're 2023, and we're seeing that. Let me just go ahead and bring this one into the frame too. This is just
You might have to drop it into the chat for me because I can't see it.
oh, of
But I'm
course,
sure the viewers will be able
the view
to.
view is weird. Yeah, so it is. It's essentially just this bar chart comparing GPT-3 versus GPT-4. And just how much it's actually started surpassing uh, uh, even regular users of these exams. And I mean, it's passing the bar, it's passing uh, uh, all sorts of different difficult tests. And uh, again, this is comparing an already impressive model of 3.5 to 4. And um, you know, who knows what 5 is going to bring, let alone 6, 7, 8. It's already far surpassed the human capability at this point. And so then you asked about platforms, right?
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say just beyond ChatGPT. So that's uh, it's basically like a super advanced chatbot.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a bunch of different AI tools. You've been using Midjourney a lot. What are some of the other ones that you've started to explore?
Yeah, the most wild one is really the text to audio. And so 11 Labs has been hands down the most mind blowing one. However, there's an open source model that's called Bark, and uh, you can go on it. It's open source, so again, you can play around with it for free, and it's starting to include things like laughter and even pauses, like the real nuanced ways of how we distinguish actual language versus a robot speaking. It's just so eerily real. Um,
Hmm.
and so yeah, 11 Labs. I've been playing around with that for a while and used it to clone my own voice and do several things there. But I'm trying to think what else I've have played around with the Auto GPT. There's several different um, auto agent models that you can play around with, different platforms that offer that. Um, it still has a ways to go, but even a
Hmm.
ways to go in this environment could be months, not years. And so
Right.
that's the crazy thing.
Exactly. So we've got text in ChatGPT. We're starting to get audio. Um, how long is it before we have AI generated photorealistic video?
Oh man. Well, if you've seen kind of the most recent, like everybody saw the what Google put out. I forget the actual name of that model right off the top of my head, but you know they released it in January, and everybody's seen now the Will Smith eating spaghetti uh, gifs that were made from it,
Right.
and it looks hideous. But now I think I don't know if it was Stable Diffusion or if there was another white paper that came out, but now, I mean, they have really honed in uh, these um, these text to video models to where I mean, it's still clunky. You can still see the um uh, some disillusionment in it, but it's not far. I mean, I would say a year. A year, we're going to see some really impressive changes. Because again, that's only 4 months ago that we went from this really clunky, like it understood the basic subject of what it's trying to create to now, like one of the things is like one of the examples they showed was a teddy bear playing a guitar, a bass guitar, and so it actually showed it like legit strumming like this big old fluffy teddy bear strumming this bass
Hmm.
guitar and not really distorting that at all. So it's doing really well to not um, to incorporate a ton of noise like we were seeing in those older models. So
Right. I'm just thinking of some of the cool and maybe weird applications of this. So imagine you could take an existing movie. I don't know why it popped into my head, but Django. So you can take Django, you can train the AI on our voices,
yep,
and then probably have the image capability to overlay your faces on the exist or whoever's faces on the existing characters in that movie. And then you could have Trey playing Dr. Schultz,
yes,
sounding like Trey,
right,
but maybe with a German accent, and Dane's face overlaid on Django.
yeah,
I mean, it's just so. I mean,
uh,
things like that are going to be novel. I think the real, like, we had Google, Facebook, Apple, those tech giants kind of emerge. I think it's probably just because of the pace of change right now and the number of players in the space, it's probably too early to know what and who those what those use cases are and who those players are going to be long term. Um, but it's going to be really entertaining to watch, and
yeah.
I'm sure we're going to have a lot of fun along the way.
Well, and then you're starting to get to this question of embodiment. So you have your dream for the movie maker that you can just overlay an existing face. I actually imagine entertainment to this point of uh, where we can just generate whatever show we want. So we can prompt the model to say, "Hey, I love Westworld and Friends and I don't know, Doctor Who, and create for me an endless TV show with
Mm.
these certain add additional parameters. Like with your ability to be able to stop it in anywhere in that process and add additional prompts. But again, it's generative, so you could just have an endless show, whatever you want, in any voices you want. You can obviously you could just create you can create to whatever granularity you want, or you could just have it, you know, provide it general inputs and it will just run. I
Mhm.
and so this idea of like, um, yeah, that to me is the dream, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and then I guess kind of continuing on is like everybody's there's this guy David Shapiro on YouTube. Definitely check him out because he's a super smart dude. But just had a recent episode on when will we have Westworld? When will that actually become a reality?
Mm.
And you have Disney now. There's also another link. I'll share that too. Uh, of the animatronics that they're starting to make. They had a bunny literally poke its head out of a box, or a total robot,
Mhm.
and poke its head out of a box, roll out of the box, and then like skate on the stage. And it's like that's insane to be able to have
Mhm.
that fluidity and the have that sort of animation in a real life form. So now you talk about embodiment of these super intelligent AI brains, and now you're just plugging it into these animatronics. Um,
Mhm.
and obviously, we can then talk about X1 and the company that OpenAI is investing in to actually have actual robots with the GPT brain inside of it. That's and the crazy thing is that's coming in the fall. Like that's an
That's
actual
nuts.
rollout that they're planning on doing, and that's
Hmm.
You can either be incredibly scared about that, or it's like, man, I would love something to help me with my projects at home whenever I'm working. Uh,
Yeah.
it could be a real helping hand, but obviously people are
Hmm.
thinking immediately Terminator, and so what do we do?
Right.
Where's the balance there and living in that tension?
Yeah, it's going to be super interesting. It's really making me think of the first time that I listened to or came across Kathy Wood and ArkInvest research about they talk about these five platforms of innovation, and how different S curves will eventually feed each other. So one of those S curves is obviously robotics, which is what you're talking about in terms of the animatronics coming to life. um, you've obviously got GPT, GPT, and all of those variants, whether it's text, image detection, things like that. Um, that S curve is going to feed the robotics S curve. Then you've got companies like Tesla, who are literally going to be producing humanoid robots,
Right,
right? Elon Musk also now owns Twitter, so he's got an incredibly large corpus of data to train his AI models on. Obviously, Tesla, just as a company, for those who don't know, all of Tesla's cars, since I can't remember, but from like the early 20 teens, have been equipped with the hardware for full self driving. So they've been capturing real life data for about a decade now. They probably have a larger data advantage than any other company. So you combine these text models with the robotics capabilities that we're developing. I think we get to Westworld a hell of a lot sooner than maybe either of us hope. But then again, that's the importance of, brings up the point of, do we need to be having discussions about ethics in AI? I think probably so.
yeah,
Folks like Elon have been banging the drum on this for decades now. Um, I saw some news recently about Microsoft getting rid of their AI safety team. That's probably not a good idea. OpenAI was started, OpenAI, the creators of ChatGPT, were started as a nonprofit for this exact reason, to make sure that AI is used for good. They are no longer a nonprofit,
yep,
now that Microsoft has taken a 49% stake in the company in exchange for $10 billion in Azure credits. Um, so I think this could really go south, um, if the right controls aren't in place and if people aren't building responsibly.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you have many big wigs in the space having multiple views on the alignment problem. Some people don't see it as a problem. They're saying like, oh yeah, it'll just figure itself out, and we shouldn't we shouldn't be too concerned about it. But then you have those like Yukowski, Eliezer Yukowski, who has been foretelling of this time for the past decade, at least the last decade, and saying like, look, guys, this has to stop. Otherwise, it's over. Like, uh,
Mhm.
and obviously that's the whole over rotate. Rotation on the other side, and then really it's all tied around of this Molech game theory complex. And for those who don't know, the Molech game theory is it's essentially a lose lose for everybody. And the example that's most recent about that explains this is the social media filters implementation. And so we first created social media right as a way to connect. Then people realize, oh, I can monetize, so I need to get as many followers as possible on these social platforms. And then the social platforms said, hey, how about you just add this feature and this will make you look more beautiful. And so then you have people now creating essentially false imitations of themselves so they can get more views and more followers. And then it just continues to compound on itself, so that ultimately what you're putting out there in the world is actually a false personhood of yourself, just so you can get more views, and then everybody loses because you lose your identity in the process. Everybody ends up losing their identity in the process. all for the sake of getting more views. And so it's like that implementation ultimately led to a net negative for everybody.
Mhm.
Um, and so that's then you have people talking about the paperclip optimizer. And so going back to the alignment is what goal do you give these AIs to actually carry out their functions? And the paperclip optimizer is a cheeky way of explaining this of how it could go terribly wrong. Is you give the intent for these AIs to say, hey, we need you to make as many paperclips as possible. That's the goal. So the AI
Mhm.
says, okay, I'll create a bunch of agents that will embed those in a bunch of robots to essentially collect as many resources as possible to make paperclips, and I will create as many paperclips at all costs. And you don't put any parameters on that. You just let it carry out that goal. You can obviously see like it's not going to be afraid to murder. It's not going to be afraid to take out uh, anything that we deem as useful because its main goal is to create paperclips. And so
Right.
you train this or you give the wrong intent to these AIs. You can see massive devastation uh, if you plug it in, give it the ability to actually carry out those tasks. And I think we aren't seeing that because it's not manifesting itself just yet in the world. But we're already seeing people create these automated GPTs like Chaos GPT, and connecting it to the internet, right? And saying, yeah, you can here's $60, do what you can to create mass
Mhm.
destruction in the world. And right now it's creating a Twitter account and sharing some bad posts or mean tweets, and that's about the extent. But actually give this thing a hammer or a chainsaw, like who who's to say that it couldn't just go rampant and become a real issue?
Mhm.
So
Yeah, definitely a lot of ways that this can go sideways. But at the same time, I maybe am a hopeless optimist. I believe that technology over the long term will be used for good and that we will find ways to put controls in place to make sure that it does serve us. Um, that being said, it is definitely a little bit scary. And I think one of the narratives that we hear at the moment is that AI is going to displace a tremendous amount of jobs, and people are not going to be able to find work.
mhm.
What are your thoughts on that, Trey?
So I've I live in that tension. I think it's a very real reality. I think uh, with the discussions I've had, there's no doubt it's going to be the most disruptive technology we've ever faced. It's with every new technology creates new potential jobs, but the replacement, I think the net job creation versus the job it's going to take away is going to be, I mean, it's going to be fractional. How many jobs are
Mm.
actually going to be created from this? Especially when you start talking about autonomous agents to essentially carry out tasks for you, like, and then you embody these things so they can actually do the human tasks in the physical world. That's those two things coupled together are going to be insane. But there's going to be things that people always will want a human for. And talking to one of my friends, you're never going to replace the barber because even if I can get a perfect haircut from an AI robot, I'm going to always want to talk to Susie, who does my hair, because I know
Mm.
Susie and she knows me, and um, there's this relationship we actually do have, and then we can go down the rabbit hole of relationships with robots and all that stuff. It's a whole different world. And so anywho, that is so you're going to have, I think, those evergreen jobs that people will always want people for. Um, but I think this is where now the optimist side of this doom and gloom is. And this is where actually Sam Altman I agree with Sam Altman's approach, even though he's kind of perpetuating the problem. He believes that as soon as this defining line happens where AI will, people will realize and businesses will realize having an AI is significantly cheaper and more efficient than having humans, and people start doing a mass, businesses start doing a mass exodus of their employees to other businesses inside their business and replacing it with AI. That's when we, as a society, should go full throttle into trying to automate the entire supply chain, because then there will be no reason why we couldn't, right? Because that's assuming
Mhm.
that you now have autonomous driving, you have humanoid robots that can actually carry out these tasks, um, and so now you can, if we have that infrastructure in place, you have the full end to end from harvesting raw material to actual delivery of product to the end consumer. Your costs are essentially nil, right? And
Right.
that you could then talk about where you have a universal base income, where
Mhm.
now we have to rethink what work looks like, because I don't think you, just by automating all the jobs and automating the work, you now still remove the purpose of why people exist. And so I think that's the deeper thing. It's like, where should we find our purpose? Looking
Mhm.
10 years down the road, what does that look like for people? Because a lot of people find it in their job, but maybe you can do a job that isn't absolutely necessary, but you can do what you actually love at that point, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Right.
I'd be willing to guess there's a large majority of people that have a job because they actually have to have the job. But if you don't actually have to have the job and you can actually do what you love to do, then that sounds like a win. And then all your needs are actually provided to you automatically by robots. That's
Mhm.
uh, yeah.
Right.
Obviously, there's a
It's
lot of
an
tension there, but yeah.
Yeah, but an age of abundance, I guess, is the that's the bright side of where we're going. That's the future that I want to help build, that you want to help build, and that hopefully we can inspire other people through just talking about some of this cool stuff to go out and build as well. Um, when it comes to jobs and stuff like that, I we started off this episode talking about something that's different about this AI ramp, which is the pace of innovation. So I think when I look back and I say, how much automation was there in 1920
Hmm.
relative to the unemployment? And I say, how much automation is there today
Hmm.
relative to the unemployment? I mean, we've just gone through a pandemic. We're fighting inflation, but interest rates have gone up a ton in a very short amount of time. Unemployment has not shot up yet, at least as of this reporting.
Hmm.
Yet we have several orders of magnitude more automation today than we did in 1920. Think about how many jobs have been displaced based on automation that is today.
Yeah.
If you could just go and watch the show, How It's Made, and
Yeah.
you see a modern industrial manufacturing process, I mean, they're insane. So it's an unreal amount of automation that exists today, and yet unemployment is in the U.S. at least near historic lows. So I think that tells you something that I believe is inherent in the human spirit, which is the pursuit of progress. Um, Innovation too, I think is part of the human spirit, and I think that it's very easy for us to um, look at the world around us, which we're very familiar with, and say, oh, if an AI is going to now do the job of 80% of lawyers because it scored in the 80th percentile of the LSAT, then 80% of the lawyers are going to get displaced.
Hmm.
Well, maybe, but that doesn't necessarily mean that 80% of lawyers are not going to have a job, right? Because at the same time, while you're automating away a lot of jobs, you're also going to create entirely new industries. And so, in some ways, I think that that fear of displacing jobs really just comes down to a lack of creativity and this inability for us to see what comes next. Um, but that's what the greatest entrepreneurs throughout time, that's what they do. They find those new things. They start those companies, they create those new use cases, and they ultimately change our lives for the better in terms of the value that they provide to us. So somehow I'm optimistic. Maybe if we run out of things to do on this planet, we'll just go and find another one to work
Yeah.
on. I don't know, maybe Mars.
Yeah.
Um, maybe we'll, you know, maybe breakthroughs that are happening with AI, with quantum computing, maybe those are just the technologies that'll help us expand the scope and scale of human consciousness. And that's kind of the new frontier. So that stuff just sounds really exciting to me. I know going to space, going to Mars doesn't really fire up a lot of people because at this point it's basically a death sentence. Um, but I think of 100, 150, 200 years from now that it it won't be that way.
Right.
Um, if you just go back to 1999 and you were to explain to someone what you can do on this handheld device that we all carry around today, I mean, this is a supercomputer,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Compared to anything that was available back then, and we use it to post funny pictures and send memes and stuff like that. You know,
Yeah.
back in the day, that kind of computing power was only available to people that were doing cutting edge research. But now, pretty much everyone can afford it. You touched on it, the deflationary aspect of this technological innovation. So I think it can be a massive force to good. I think it's gonna lift billions of, it has the potential to lift billions of people out of poverty.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, we we're gonna talk about the dangers and the concerns because they need to be addressed. But I think oftentimes what you'll see in the news is just the bad stuff,
Yeah.
and that's just catering to how our brains are wired. But there's a good side of this too. This could also go incredibly well for us as a species. Yes, it's going to be different. Um, you know a lot of I don't know what the reach of this podcast is going to be, if there's any like 80, 90, 100 year olds that are going to be watching this, but um you know I mean,
Yeah.
a
No,
lot's going to change.
I hear that, and I guess even with what I'm saying, I just think it might possibly play out a different way. However, if we are all, this could be a joining force for good for all of us to actually really look at our humanity in a raw way, to actually for all of us to evaluate what makes us human, what makes us unique that AI truly can't replace. Um, and I think it's worth asking that question collectively, and um, that's good. I think right now a lot of people don't face the reality of that, and they can just shove their face in a job, and then they work till they're 80, 90 years old, and then they look back on their life and are like, man, I gave up a lot of my personhood for the sake of maybe some trivial gain. And so I think really what AI is going to do is maybe just pull back the curtain to expose what people are afraid to actually face. And that I think is great. It's going to be hard for a lot of people.
Mhm.
And I'm really talking about like people who sacrifice their life for the job. At the end of the day, if all the jobs are gone, it's really gonna it's really gonna make you face your own reality in a new way. That I think is a good thing. I think people need to answer that question for themselves sooner rather than later. Um, and
Yeah,
yeah,
I think we're going to learn a lot. We're going to learn a lot about ourselves. We're going to learn a lot about humanity and what it means to be human.
yeah,
um, I think that's exciting.
it is. It is. I mean, I I love that we're asking questions now that we have only read in science fiction, um, and now the dreaming is done or coming to a close, and we can actually, and we don't have time for talking about singularity, maybe on the next episode, but like thinking of getting to a point where really we're going to get to a place in technology where all possibilities are at our fingertips, and it's going to come down to our creativity to make those realized, and that's exciting. That's
Yeah.
some people are super scared of that, but I mean, it's just cool. It's cool. It's gonna that we have to actually answer those questions. Our generation's got to
Hmm.
answer those questions. It's a weighty responsibility, but I'm here for it.
Hmm. Absolutely. We're going to find out. We're going to be documenting our journey. The more we learn, we'll be sure to share that with you all, our wonderful audience, who's probably very small right now, given that we're just getting this off the ground. But Trey, I appreciate you. I think it was a great conversation. There's so much more that we wanted to
Oh
cover.
man.
So for you all, our first viewers, thank you all for tuning in, and we can't wait to bring you the next episode of the
Yeah, man.
Pursuit of Progress.
Episode 1 in the books. Heck yeah. And that wasn't so bad. That
Okay,
was fun.
not so bad, not so bad. There we go.
All right.
Okay,
See you, bro.
woo. Cool. Stop recording.